Everybody here at the second service. We've been on this journey of looking who Jesus is and what he's all about, and so it's a little different way of reading God's Word than just looking at the stories. We actually want to look at what does this say about Jesus, and so that's the question. Just reminding you to approach every chapter with, and that is, okay, what does this say about Jesus? What do we learn about him? What does he care about? What does he want us to care about? All those kind of things, and so this chapter is like a journey. Mark is very intentional in this chapter of helping us understand what's wrong with the Jews and what humans really do need. And so there's where we're at. Mark chapter 7. This is the first morning that Lucas just decided maybe Edward is no-go, and so we'll see here. And so he's getting a voice. That happens, right? They get older, and then all of a sudden, wow. And so we are in this great place. So at the beginning of the chapter, I just want to give us kind of a big picture overview for a moment. The beginning of the chapter, the Israelites, of course, the Pharisees, they're like, Jesus, why do you guys eat with unclean hands? And Jesus is like, really? It's like you have misunderstood what the law and what God requires. It's like it really doesn't matter what kind of food you eat and how your hands are when you eat them. What matters is your heart. And so after he goes on that journey talking about unclean hands and how really it's unclean hearts that matter, and while doing that, he actually quotes from the old law, the Old Testament, to help them see that, well, he uses that great verse, right? Your lips are far from me, right? Your lips are with me, but your lives, your hearts, you don't do what I say, you just say it. But you don't really mean it. And so he says, let me give you an illustration of that. And so Mark's going to illustrate this concept of it's really not what's on the outside, it's what's inside that matters. And he's going to illustrate that through a connection Jesus is going to make with a woman who's a foreigner, which of course that foreign woman, what would she be to the Pharisees? You know what she'd be, completely unclean. And so he's going to relate how they have focused on something trivial that's not important, and they've misunderstood what really is important, and that of course is sin in their lives and their hearts. And so we know that's true of the Pharisees. We know over and over, right? Lots of illustrations how the Jews, these leaders, are missing the boat. They think that because they do all the externals properly, that the internals must be right also, and of course they're not. And so he's going to use this great story. Okay, that's where we're going here in a moment. The other part of this thing that happens in this text is I love this part about God and his sense of humor. And so we're going to see that in this text as he interacts with this Syrophoenician woman, right, over in Tyre. And there's this little proverb back and forth, this little interaction that goes between this Syrophoenician woman and Jesus. And if you don't read it properly, it's easy to miss it. It's like it's this little banner that takes place, right, between two individuals, very much within the culture and the context of the first century. And so we'll look at that here in a moment. But just a reminder that God really does have a sense of humor, and that's where we get our sense of humor from, right, is from God, and it's okay. And some of us, are funnier than others, right? But that's okay, right? We all have that sense of humor and the thing that happens. And you'll see that in the text in a moment. But just some reminders from the Old Testament even. Think about the Proverbs for a moment. If you go back over to Proverbs, some of these great Proverbs, because that's what he uses in this text as a proverb. So I thought, even within the Proverbs, we see God's sense of humor. Chapter 11. Verse 22, as a ring of gold in a pig's snout, so is a beautiful woman who lacks discretion. And you're like, okay, somebody who wrote that, like God who created that saying, he had to have had a sense of humor, right? It's like putting a fine piece of jewelry on a pig. That's what it's like when a beautiful woman lacks discretion. And we conjure up that image of a pig and like what their daily living looks like, right? And it's nothing to do with cleanliness or with like gold rings or anything. And so there's that little bit of humor that's there. Another proverb where we see God's humor just kind of like poking out of the situation. That's a great one there. Let's save that one for last. 21 verse 9, better to live on a corner of the roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Right? It's better to just live up on the roof and like find a little place there in the rain and the cold than it is to live with the quarrelsome wife. And you're like, again, it's that imagery of like, okay, God has a sense of humor. I think one that, it works for today even, chapter 22, verse 13. The lazy person says, there might be a lion outside. I could be killed in the streets. So it's like, oh yeah, God even gets that kind of proverb, doesn't he? Where it's like, there really could be death today in any of our doors, right? Like we've all left the house. It could happen. There could be a train wreck. There could be the plane could fall from the sky like we saw yesterday, right? It actually land on top of one of us. And so, and you're like, yep. But God, of course, is poking fun at that, isn't he? He's like, yeah, there's all kinds of things can happen. So the lazy person uses that as an excuse to not go to work. Anyway, so back to this. So we're going to look at this story here, but it's a great story for lots of reasons. Just to kind of connect the dots for a moment there. Remember that there's only 2 times where Jesus is amazed at someone's faith. Both of them, remember, 7. It's Mark 7 and it's Luke 7, so it's easy to remember. It's also Matthew 15. But anyway, Mark 7 and Luke 7, it's the Syrophoenician woman and the Roman centurion where Jesus on both occasions, and he does this in Matthew's version, and so we don't quite get as much information in this version, but in Matthew 15, he's also amazed that this woman could have so much faith, such great faith. And so the story is important on lots of levels. But as always, we want to look at what does this say about Jesus Christ. And so we'll put it up here on the text, up on the board. So starting in verse 24 now, he's had his discussion about how it's not the externals but the internals that really matter. And then he decides to go on vacation. And where does Jesus go? He decides to get away from it all and go to a little place called Tyre. And so this is over on the coast. He's like decided to go to Cancun or wherever, right? He's like going to go to the coast and South Padre Island or something. Kind of hard to envision going to South Texas right now, but for a vacation. But anyway, he's going to the coast and he's going to relax and he wants to get away from the crowds and get away from everybody else. And so he goes on a little vacation, and here it picks up the text. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, because he's kind of like wanting to get away. But of course, he couldn't keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an unclean spirit. I really appreciate my version, New American Standard, of making the point of saying an unclean, because it relates back to the unclean hands that the disciples were just eating their food with. And so now she comes with a real need, right? An unclean spirit that's invaded her little daughter. It's like insides matter. And so Jesus is making a point, right? But of course it also is making some points about Jesus. And of course she fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, born in, Syrophoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. And so you get the scene. He's just trying to escape. I'm going to go back to my text, and so New American here. And so he's just trying to escape, right? But this woman comes, falls at his feet, and is asking Jesus, hey, can you help me? Can you help me? And of course, verse 27 now, we've got Jesus saying to her, let the children be satisfied first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. And you're like, wow. See, if you're not careful and you're only thinking like culturally from our vantage point today, you would think, wow, Jesus is pretty harsh here. Like, what did he just tell this woman? And where did he put her? Kind of like under the table with the dogs, basically. But remember, it's a proverb. It's like, it's a thing. And where's this woman? She's right there at the edge of Israel. And so would she know how the Jews considered her? Of course she would. Would that be a cultural relevance kind of thing? Of course. They would all know how all this works, right? Remember, it had only been 190, it had been almost exactly 200 years earlier that Antiochus IV Epiphanes, one of Alexander the Great's Greek descendants of his army that was ruling all of that land 200 years earlier. Remember what he did when he came to the temple? He went up to the temple and he roasted a pig on the altar. And how did he know that that would be incredibly hurtful to the Jews? Well, they all knew the culture, right? They knew each other's culture, and so and habits and laws and religious values and all that kind of stuff. And so here's this woman doing this little thing with Jesus now. So Jesus looks at her and he's like, I'm kind of like on vacation here, but okay, it's besides all that, I'm here to talk to the Jews first, right? For it is not right to take the children's bread. So he's kind of like the bread. The children are like the Jews. And then toss that bread himself to the dogs underneath. And so of course, she immediately replies back. It's this back and forth thing that's so amazing with Jesus. And of course, Jesus is just like, it's like he hears these words and you can just tell there's the pause where he's like, uh-oh, I've got another one with great faith. Here we go. And she's not a Jew. Lord, she replied, even the dogs on the table eat the children's crumbs. And he told her, for such a reply, you may go, the demon has left your daughter. So she went home, found her child lying on the bed, and the demon gone. And of course, in the Matthew section over to Matthew 15, he's like, okay, you want to see great faith? That's great faith. What made that woman have great faith? This really isn't in the lesson or in your handout or anything, but what made that woman have great faith? What is she saying in that parable? She's like, just the profoundness of this. It's so huge. Jesus is like telling her, this is what I've come to do. This is my purpose. I'm going to start with my own people, the Jews, and I'm going to share with them the gospel. Because God, I've had a special relationship now with them for a couple of thousand years. And so I'm going to give them bread first. And the dogs have to wait. In other words, the outsiders have to wait. And then she says this. It's not just that she challenges him on the proverb. It's like, it's not just a challenge. Well, even the dogs get a little bit of scraps. That's a part of the parable. That's what she's saying on the surface. But what is she really saying to Jesus? What is she really saying that shows how great her faith is? Like, what does she say? She's like looking at Jesus and going, I don't need the full Jesus here. I don't need every ounce of your power and everything you do. I don't need the full loaf of bread. I don't need to make a sandwich. I just need to do what? I just need you to take the smallest little crumb that falls between the cracks of wood on the table, and that'll heal my daughter. That's what this woman just said. And Jesus is like, uh-oh, she actually gets who I am. She sees beyond this Jewish cultural stuff and the externals, and she sees my power. She sees just how much even a little crumb can do. And so Jesus is like, all right, there's a woman with great faith. So that's our story. Now, as always, we have to ask our question, who is Jesus? So, who is Jesus? What does this say about Jesus? What does this say about what he's doing? I think first and foremost, this reminds us that Jesus desires a personal relationship with us. It's like, it's not the externals, it's the internals. It's not the unclean hands. Jesus didn't set up the old law to make sure his people had clean hands. He just didn't do it. It wasn't a concern. He didn't care. He didn't care about unclean hands. What did he care about? A relationship with them. And so it's true with this woman. It's true with Jews. It's true with everybody. Jesus desires a relationship. He wants us to be in tune with him, to be his person, and for him to be our God. It's just a very personal kind of thing, isn't it? He's so, like, he comes to this earth, and can't you just, have you ever, like, where is it you go? It depends upon the time Shill and Bruce and I were talking about this Wednesday night. We had just been to Houston, matter of fact, a few weeks ago, and that weekend we were gone, and it was, of course, before the storm and all that, and we'd gone to the Houston Art Museum because, it's the fourth largest city in America now, and their museum's really up and coming, and it's really grown. It's a huge museum. And so, but they've done a great job of like marching through the years. Like you go from room to room in this museum, it's like, okay, we're in the Baroque 1550s to 1700s, and everything's looking like it does in that time period. Oh, now we're in the, we're in the early 1800s, and all of a sudden the landscape pictures that look realistic and all that kind of stuff. And so we're marching through, but of course, the journey of art is really the journey of man's view of God. And so, you look in some of those time periods and they've got Jesus, like, how do they have God? Or how do they describe Jesus? Like during the Baroque time period, Jesus is like, he's like bleeding out, and he's always hurting, he looks very sorrowful, and life is really bad. Or, another time period, it's like God is like fierce and like, and he's ready to take you out if you mess up. And so there's these different vantage points of who they think God was at that time period in that art. And it's like, but do we ever have Jesus just like sitting at a table relaxing? He's got some of his disciples with him, and here this woman comes up and he laughs with her, and there's this little interaction. It's so human in relationship, isn't it? It's so like something that would happen. Roy was last service. It's something where you'd see yourself sitting at a table with Roy and just talking about something and kind of laughing and joking about something very cultural in the moment. And here's Jesus doing this. And so, wow, Jesus really does desire a relationship with us. But I don't think it stops there. I think if I say, why would Jesus do this? Why would he make the point of traveling to a foreign part of the land? This is the only time he does it in the text, matter of fact, in his journeying around, right? The rest of the time he likes to stay around the Decapolis, around the Sea of Galilee, and of course he'll make his way into Jerusalem several times and eventually die on the cross. But this is the one time that he I think I'm gonna go over to foreign land and check it out. And he ventures over there. Why would he do this? And so I think this leads itself to number 2, and that is he understands we really do need mercy, but more importantly, he really, really wants to show us mercy. That's what Jesus desires. Jesus is not in the, can I capture you messing up kind of God. He's not the, I'm looking, I'm waiting, I want to see it happen. I'm looking for you to mess up so I can get you. No, he's in the, I really would like to show you mercy. I really want to show a woman that's living over there who has great faith, my mercy. And so he goes and takes the time and lets this woman talk, and then he hears about her great faith, and he just, this was like, after this little discussion, the apostles, I'm sure, were like, the disciples are like, what is he doing with this foreign Greek woman? Like, he's actually talking to her. Can you imagine all the taboos he broke? Much less talking to a Jewish woman. He talks to a foreign woman who's a pagan out in their land about his relationship with the Jews and this woman, and he actually grants her request. How they would have looked at that, like, why is he doing this? What possessed Jesus to do this? And so Jesus, of course, on the other hand, you can just hear how he's just like, you just know he's just so pleased at this point. He's pleased with the woman's faith out of nowhere in this foreign land to have such great faith. And he's pleased that he was able to heal her daughter. And there's this was a great journey. Can you imagine? He went back, right? They came back into Israel from this, and Jesus was probably feeling refreshed, like, oh man, I knew there would be somebody that would want a relationship with me. And here she is. And so he's all like excited. And the disciples are like troubled. Like, what in the world is he doing? They'll figure it out later, of course, right? They're going to be instructed and taught. And by Acts chapter 2, they're going to have figured it out. Oh, this is what we're here to do. But in the meantime, it takes some time for them to see it. But of course, Jesus, on the other hand, is loving it. It's what he wants to do. He wants to show mercy. And so we don't need to like backtrack into the Old Testament, right? There's plenty of examples of that all throughout the Old Testament of the compassionate God. But this is the lesson. It's Jesus really does desire to show mercy, and he doesn't really care about whether or not you're eating with clean hands, right? It's just that simple. That's the position in this chapter. He's like, really, I'm more concerned about, are you showing mercy to other people and sharing your food? Not whether or not you had clean hands when you ate your own food. And so this text helps us see that, doesn't it? Wow, this is what's important to Jesus. And so the text says it's important for him to show mercy. It's important for him to show mercy to the individual, to a Syrophoenician woman who's a Greek out in the middle of nowhere. Well, in Tyre, much far away from Jerusalem's temple, right? Over there in the multi-idol worshiping Greeks. This would be like far, far away. It was only like 30 miles distance, but it might as well be halfway across the planet when it comes to all the stuff that's happening here. He desires mercy for the Jews because this is his whole point. He's trying to help them see, I don't care about the externals, I only care about your heart. Stop layering, because that's what had happened. They had taken the law and the 623 laws that exist and made thousands upon thousands of laws that topped on top of them, right? And here's an example of them. The law doesn't say anything about unclean hands when you eat and how many times you have to wash and all of that. That's the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the rest of them layering upon the law all of this stuff, these traditions of men that it's called in the earlier part of the chapter. And so Jesus is like, I want to show you guys mercy, but I can't because you're running off practicing this kind of stuff. Remember when they come to him and they want to throw the woman caught in adultery and they want to throw the stones at her? Do you ever see that as bloodthirsty mob that are almost giddy to kill her with stones? That's the way I see them. Because when Jesus starts in on hey, any of you not committed a sin ever, go ahead and start it up, let's go. And they all kind of like, you could just see it. You could just see them like, oh, man. And off they go. Like, we didn't get to do it. It was going to be really fun. And you're like, okay, there's something wrong with that, right? Picture. And God's like, I really want to help them. I want to help the Jews. I want to show them mercy. And of course, ultimately, he wants to show mercy for all the nations, right? Because he's going to go on this journey to a foreign part, Tyre, into this place. And it is amazing that the only two people that have great faith, here is the first person who gets Jesus. A Syrophoenician woman, Greek, who lives not even in Israel. She's the only one that gets him at this point. She's like, no, all I need is a little crumb. It's like, there is a Jewish lady, right? Remember she comes, she like touches the hem, and she's like, all I've got to do is touch his garment and I'll be healed. And this is a person going, I don't even need to touch him. I don't even need to touch the hem of the garment. Just throw me a little crumb, like just a little speck of the bread. My daughter will get healed. And Jesus, of course, like, oh, this is the kind of person, this will be so great to show her some mercy. And so we need to look out for that. Now, you know where this is going, of course, in the application. It's really easy. You can list these out in a heartbeat, right? What are you doing to develop a relationship with Jesus? What's this woman going to do? This woman sought him out and told her story and pleaded with him and then does whatever it takes, right? She's going to do whatever it takes to make sure her daughter is cleansed. And Jesus, of course, cleanses this daughter internally, right? It is the epitome of an unclean heart, right? There's an unclean spirit inside of her. And Jesus is like, that demon's getting out right now. So what am I doing to develop a relationship with Jesus? How far will I go? What kind of steps do I need to take? Obviously, you're here this morning, so good job. See, that's developing a relationship with Jesus, isn't it? It's a part of what we do. It's like, do we remind ourselves that our children really need this? You know, it doesn't just happen, does it? It's not like they just like, okay, I think I want to have a relationship with Jesus. Did you hear it this morning? We got a little laugh over here in our little quadrant of the auditorium because Grant was over there. We finished the kind of the rah-rah song, the chorus song that we had learned, back a year ago. And we finished the song, and Grant was over there going, amen, amen. And you're like, okay, he's in it. But that didn't just happen. That took him going to the Spanish congregation primarily, right? Where things are a little bit better when it comes to the amen department. But that rubs off. Yeah, that rubs off. It's like it just happens. It's just, it's like but you have to get them here. You have to get them in Bible class. You got to get them in at home in the stuff, right? In the Bible and all of that. And it's true for us too. How easy it is to fall out of habit if we're not careful of reading God's Word or coming to worship or whatever it is to help each of us develop this kind of relationship with Jesus. And of course, develop a relationship with His people. It's not just like, oh, I don't need people. No, it's a part of what we've got to do in order to develop our relationship with Jesus, because the church is the body of Christ. So, what kind of work do we need to do to help our children, ourselves, our church, develop a relationship with Jesus? So I think that's a great question to ask. But it's also important to ask Him for mercy in your life. Jesus, I think this is a great example of that, and that is our prayers don't have to be like a Sunday morning worship prayer only. Hopefully you don't pray like the guys that come up here and pray, because like they're leading us on communion prayer. Well, it's going to be a little different prayer than your Tuesday morning prayer or your Tuesday night in the middle of the night prayer, hopefully, right? That you're asking Him to show mercy in your life. And remember, what does He really want to do? You're not asking Him to do something He really doesn't want to do. That's the beauty of this. This woman thought, right? She's probably thinking, this guy has well, I know she knew, right? Because we know from the text that she understood exactly what Jesus could do for her daughter. She knew His power, that He was God in the flesh. Somehow she had figured that out through all the interactions or whatever she'd heard about Jesus in the past or whatever it might be. But she had no idea what kind of Jesus He was going to be. Like, what kind of God is He? Until the moment He does this little thing with her, and she's like, oh, you're a personal God, and you really do want this to happen. Because I don't have to bring my daughter. I don't have to do any more. I don't have to jump through some hoops. I don't have to say so many things or say so many prayers for the next 2 years and hope for the best. It's, your daughter's healed. Go home and you'll find her. She's good to go. It's that quick. And so maybe we need to ask Him for mercy. And finally, number 3, we're going to have to go to this place, right? Because really this is all about our outreach, isn't it? It's like Jesus cares about showing people mercy. And a church that doesn't care about showing people mercy is just not His church. Because this is what He wants to do. It's like He makes it so plain. He's like, if your church or your people, thinking about the Jews, care more about unclean hands than hearts, you've got some things to learn about, right? I mean, that's the position in this chapter as he goes back and forth. He finally tells them, verse 18, are you so lacking in understanding? Do you not understand this? It's not what's on the outside, it's what's on the inside that matters. And then he just basically declares, verse 19, all food is clean. Doesn't matter about food. Nobody cares about food. I don't care about food. Jesus is like, I don't care what you eat. I could care less. What I care about is your heart. And so then, of course, he does this illustration next. Mark lets us in on the next little phase. So we're going to have to show mercy, of course, all over the place, aren't we? We're out of time. The world, our community, and of course within our church, we should be a people that show mercy to each other. That thing we do within the church is to help outsiders see it. Because people of the world, it's a difficult equation, isn't it? Because in the world, how many times can you mess up? Basically, not even once. Because once you've messed up, it's really over. Forgiveness is such a foreign concept outside of the Bible. Okay, you get another choice. You get another chance kind of thinking. And so how we need to be showing mercy, both to our world, in our community, and of course, to our church. And so thank you guys for being here this morning. Every week, we want to build a little bit more on who Jesus is. What does this text say about him? What does he care about? What does he act like? So far, we're seeing he is not like a Pharisee or a Sadducee, right? That's a part of this text. It's like he doesn't care about what the Pharisees care about. And it starts dawning on people, wow, he really cares about me. There's that personal relationship. And not only that, but he actually wants to show you mercy. It's what he likes to do. It's what he enjoys. And so thinking through that, it's like, okay, why does he want to have a relationship with me? So that he can love me and show me mercy. That would be our lesson today. Next week, we'll move on in the text, Lord willing. And so thanks for being here right now, though. And as always, you can ask him right now through this church, through this opportunity as we sing this last song. Talk to an elder, talk to a minister, talk to the Lord. And all of those places. I know what the elders desire here, and that's to show mercy. And I don't know how many times I'm still amazed at that, modern day examples of that, where someone will talk to the elders, and the elders will say, it's okay. That's what we're here for. And it's almost like a shock, like, oh, we thought you would kind of be like upset. And you're like, they're the elders. It's like, that's what they do. They show mercy. And that's what all of us must do, right? All of us must show mercy to others. And then people are just so shocked in this world. This week, just thinking through that, I think one day this week, Hope Light here at the building, the church, I think we had received 3 letters in one day of people who were like, literally they're almost shocked that we as an entity would actually have helped them. You're like, wow, why are they shocked at that? Well, they just don't know Jesus yet, do they? They just don't understand that's what we're in the business of doing, showing mercy. And so they're just so amazed. They're just like, they can't believe it, that somebody actually paid attention to them or actually cared enough to do this for them or whatever it was. And so keep it up as we continue to become more like Jesus, who desired to show mercy. Let's stand and sing.